The April 7th, 2014 meeting and public hearing of the Falls Church Planning Commission is now in session. Ms. G, would you please call the roll?
If I can have 10 seconds for the computer to catch up
I will
with
give you
us.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
9, 8.
Mr. John,
Present.
Ms. Hockenberry.
Here.
Mr. Meeks,
Here.
Mr. Rankin,
Here.
Ms. Rogers,
Here.
Ms. Teets,
Here.
Mr. Wodiska.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. G. Yes?
Oh, I'd like to move to reorder the agenda and move the minutes in the planner director's report after adoption of agenda, just to get those two items out of the way.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. It's been moved that we move up the approval of the minutes and planning commission and planning director's reports. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. First, we're going to ask the audience if there are any petitions to the Planning Commission of things that are not on the agenda. Seeing none, we will move on to approval of minutes for the 17th of March. Are there any amendments to the minutes as presented?
Madam Chair, I was
Yes.
not here, but in line 292, I don't think it was, it says, Mr. Travers stated that generally pipe stems are the shape of the lot, not the use of the space. Is that what he really meant to say? 292. It just seemed a little strange to me, but I wasn't here.
You did say something like that.
Okay. Okay, that's all.
Are there any other questions or comments on the minutes?
I'll move that we accept the minutes and just ask Ms. G to check that line.
We can't vote.
Okay,
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented with one check on line 192, is that?
292.
292 by Ms. G. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain. I was not
Abstain.
here.
And Mr. Meeks, do you abstain?
I'm an aye. Sorry.
Well, I think you should abstain since you weren't here.
I was here. You left before it's over, so there's.
Oh.
He was late
Well,
coming in,
then-
left before it's over.
Then that must be incorrect in the... Okay.
No, I was here.
All right, in the synopsis, you're absent, but in the actual minutes, you're here.
He was
Okay.
there,
I left early,
and
which is
then
not
so
the
did
same
Russ,
as not
right
being.
after you.
It's okay to leave early.
It was during the work session, I think. Okay, thank you very much. The synopsis was just different. Okay, so we will now move on to the planning director's report. Mr. Snyder, I hope that didn't, since we
Madam
moved it.
Chair, members of the commission, thank you very much. I did want to mention too, you have a copy of our March monthly report at your places that we have put together, and we've highlighted at the beginning of it some of the things that have happened in the past month. The groundbreaking of the Rushmark Harris Teeter project. My understanding is that it's going to closing tomorrow. They had the groundbreaking. There were some other things that have happened after that. Of course, Kensington Assisted Living has been referred out to you, and you're going to hear that first presentation tonight. There was a major work session that you all participated in with regard to Broad West mixed-use development project. We've been working on the mobility for all modes, and that's the transportation comp plan update, and that'll be coming to you in the next few meetings, April 21st. We had a couple of promotions in the staff. Garrison Kidd, who's been doing our small area plans, was promoted to senior planner.
Oh, good.
Well-deserved, and Keita Rousey, who was awarded the vacant planner job, and we're backfilling that position. We have someone coming on board April 21st, Gregory Garland. those are some of the highlights. In addition, some other activities. The Virginia's AIA had an Emerging Leaders Program, and I know at least 2 commissioners, including the chair, were there. These were 16 architects who are doing a several-month program. They're going to focus on Falls Church, taking a look particularly at the downtown area. I thought it was a very interesting opportunity for us, hosted by the Kearns Group. One of their senior architects, Brad Fricke, sponsored this. They're now on the top floor of the former Oddfellows building, which they purchased. Also, late in the month, we were awarded from COG and Urban Land Institute a technical advisory panel grant. This will be looking at the schools and additional property near West Falls Church, the planning of that. This is a program that ULI and COG do, so that will probably happen in the fall, but we've been offered that, and I think that's a real good opportunity and good timing with the need to do some planning for that area. Some of you may be familiar with those programs that ULI has done. So those are some of the highlights. There is tomorrow at 10:30 the groundbreaking for the Tinner Hill project. You may have seen the removal of some of the buildings, and they are beginning undergrounding work that'll eliminate some overhead lines on Tinner Hill that were left over from earlier projects. So a lot of activity. Also, Cindy Mester has been working with the Tinner Hill Park project, which is being done in conjunction with Fairfax County and NVPRA. And they're going to be removing the trailer that's presently on that property. There's going to be a patio or a plaza, an interpretive plaza, and a sign that's been approved that'll mark the historic area. We're handling, these are small changes to the site, some of which is in the City of Falls Church, some in Fairfax. We're going to be handling those administratively, and I'll bring you copies of what it looks like. They're sketches of where the sign will be. So that's moving forward, and hopefully we'll get implemented this spring. So a lot of activity, and of course good weather will be helpful as well as projects go forward. We are bringing to you next week fee increases where we're proposing to put a 10% increase on the development services fees. This is following 3 years. They were last updated substantially 3 years ago, with an additional 10% that we're going to use hopefully to reduce paper and do more electronic plan review and have some administrative staff help to make everything work more smoothly. So those are some of the highlights and activities that we've been undertaking the last month.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. Any questions?
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. I see on here, as you mentioned, that there's a possibility of a kickoff meeting with council on Broad and West project, March 17th. And I just want to point out that is spring break. I know I'll be out of town, and a lot of people with children may be out of town that week, so it may not be the best date. But I also understand
Is that April?
oh, you're right, sorry, that should be April. Well, anyway, it was March 17th on the memo, but April 17th is still, it's spring break. Yeah. And I just wanted to point out, although I know with the way the schedules are, you may still have to use that date.
When is our next meeting? Is it the 21st?
The 21st of April is the next meeting, and there is on the second page of your agenda, there's a list of some of the items that are scheduled for that. It's a busy evening. Comprehensive plan update on mobility for all modes, 2 ordinances on fees, and also the project that you're going to hear about tonight will be coming before you as well, the Kensington project, a work session. I'm sorry, the actual case, I believe, is that correct?
Okay, so we don't have anything on the 17th.
Okay, I'm sorry, Russ is pointing out we had that meeting, but I thought we were talking about a new meeting on here, sorry.
We've already done it.
Next meeting is Monday, the 21st.
Okay, good. Yes, Ms. Hockenberry.
I'm not on. There I am. Would it be possible to find out from the Lincoln development, how much was recycled. I know that they were doing a lot of recycling down there, and I thought that was really quite good. Of course, the Meineke building was totally just knocked down, but there was so much steel and other things in the Saab dealership that they were taking it apart piece by piece by piece. And the other thing, with all the activity going on, there seems to be a boom of single-family housing being built all over the city, knockdown and rebuilds. Is there any way to get information on the amount of coverage and the height of these buildings?
Well, they all will have grading plans, and so we could get information
Just a
on them.
synopsis of,
We'd have to do some analysis, but it is available on the grading plans, and the buildings would all have to be under
because
5
there
feet.
are a lot of questions going around the community as far as the lot coverage, the height of, and also, you know, I saw in so many of the correspondence that we had from the neighbors that we're going to be speaking with later, that, you know, preserving the integrity of the neighborhoods is written in our, you know, our guidelines, and it's just not happening. It's just all thrown out.
Well, I think one thing, we can pull together, I'll have to find time to do it, but we can see if we can pull together information on, from those grading plans in terms of,
Because when I was on city council, we did get a report every couple of months about permits. And,
well, 2 were issued in March, for example, so we are trying to track.
but I'd like to go back into last year, because a lot of them, now, like, there's 5 new buildings going up in my neighborhood within a 3-street area.
And Mr. Snyder, even though we did vote at our last meeting about the water, stormwater, what was it called? I've forgotten, it was a long name. Russ, Rob
Well, the
has
code
it.
changes to establish the stormwater
Yeah,
utility.
stormwater retention. I know we voted on that, but it seems to me that the 35% coverage cap has not been changed.
Correct.
It's still there, okay, so
Right.
if we
But-
wanted to make sure that development was following that part of the code, how would we go about doing that? I mean, not that we...
It should be on all the grading plans.
On all the grading
In terms
plans.
of what the, I believe. So
And is
we
it
can
ever
check into that.
separated from the coverage of the house, then plus all the coverage of the driveways, or is it just in one number?
I think maybe the best thing for us to do is, why don't we schedule some future work session
I think that would be a
where we can
good
look at this in more
idea.
detail, because I'd be misleading you if I gave you guesstimates. Certainly, we're following the code. I think that would be the most helpful thing if we want to do an update with you, and we can sit down with more information and put
Right.
together
And
some
I know
details
it
that
would
we can
take
look
some
at.
time to put
Yeah.
that together,
Right.
so, I mean, it's not like we want it next week.
No, but basically, I just do not trust that we're following code on the infill.
Okay.
I really don't.
Are there any other questions on the planning director's report? Okay, we'll move into old business, and our one item of new business is 6935 26th Street, 7,000 Fairfax Street subdivision application. We, as everyone will remember who was here, we had quite a lot of discussion on it at our last meeting, and we continued it until this meeting, and so we will consider it again, and then we will vote at this meeting. So, is there a presentation, Mr. Bruce?
Basically, the staff report is very similar to what was written before. I added a few things from the comments of the different departments that had commented on the original December version of the application, just as a point of making sure everything's out in the open in case the applicant wants to resubmit. We'll have a good checklist to go through in addition to our regular checklist. A number of items have been met, but there's appears to be some items that have not been met. The major new item that I have been dealing with the last day and a half, starting Friday afternoon, was a discussion I had with our counterpart in Arlington County, asking what's their interpretation of the state statute, which I put in the staff report, and they were pretty clear that they expect to be consulted and they need to grant approval since the lot is being split in half right down the county city line. So we'll need to talk further about that with the applicant. But basically, in terms of the main issue that we raised last time, that hasn't changed in terms of our recommendation to you.
You mean in terms of the pipe stems?
Right. In other
Okay.
words, our recommended motion and the background is still the same. So unless you had specific questions, I thought we might want to, I don't know what,
Oh, well, we'd like to hear the applicant's
Yeah.
presentation.
and Mr. Baskin?
Hi, I'm J.R. Swiker, 414 Park
Hi.
Avenue, one of the four owners of the project. Appreciate being able to come back and speak with you again this evening. Before I begin our remarks, for the benefit of those of you that were not here for our presentation last time, as an overview of what we're trying to do, we have a project, the existing condition of what you see up on the screen, involving 3 lots here in Falls Church City. The subdivision act we're proposing would change the apportionment and lot lines from these 3 lots to produce 3 pipe stem lots. Along with Madge and Mike, our neighbors, we've tried to approach this project and work with our city staff to produce something that achieves an aesthetic and contributes to the community. We've given our very best effort to comply with all city ordinance and produce something of value, particularly, considering the possibility of ourselves living there and that it's adjacent to our co-owner's property. As Mr. Bruce alluded, there is one sticking point in the ordinance in particular. In short, to go from this, which is what we have today, to this, 3 new pipe stem lots in Falls Church City, the staff recommendation of denial to you is based on this line of code, saying only 2 new pipe stem lots shall be permitted to be subdivided from any existing lot. So there are 2 things that I want to point out to you and why I still stand firm that the staff's interpretation of this code is wrong. And in particular, I'd ask that you pay specific attention to the singularity of the word lot and focus on what the definition of a lot is. So what is a pipe stem lot? And this is from the code. In order for it to be a pipe stem lot, there are requirements. Most importantly, the requirement of minimum area. For a lot, whether pipe stem or a normal lot in Falls Church City, it has to be 11,250 feet. So in order to form more than 2 pipe stem lots from any lot, which is what the ordinance says in the singular, you would have to begin with a 22,500 square foot lot. If it doesn't comply with any parts of this definition, you've not met the requirement for a pipe stem lot according to the ordinance. Only 2 new pipe stem lots shall be permitted to be subdivided from any existing lot. The ordinance does not say that any existing lot cannot be used in part to contribute to new lots. It has to be taken literally at face value. No existing lot, it does not say that no existing lot will be used toward the creation of more than 2 pipe stem lots. So, that being the case, what is this ordinance referring to? Well, in the hypothetical diagram here, you can see one large, deep lot in what many jurisdictions in Virginia refer to as pipe stem stacking. If you were to begin with one large, deep lot, such as depicted in this graphic, you cannot do this. In this case, one existing lot was used to form 4 pipe stem lots from that one lot. That would not be allowed under 48.2. That is not the case in our subdivision plan, and why I stand firm that we have complied with the city ordinance. That said, reasonable people can disagree. Now, in the past 2 weeks of delay that was requested, that we were happy to go along with, we've been able to secure one meeting with city staff and have not been asked for any clarifiers or amplification. But the 4 of us do stand ready to work with the city in order to find a path to yes. We don't concede that we're not in compliance now, but we would look forward to, in the event you were to vote to deny, the comprehensive list that Virginia Code requires of defects for us to address, and specifically why we're wrong here, and to make it comprehensive, because I was wary to hear Mr. Bruce bringing up a new issue implying that it could be used for denial, because we, of course, have only been able to base our comments denying on what the reasoning was given for the staff's denial, of which that was not. No.
If I could just briefly, my name is Bill Baskin, 301 Park Avenue, counsel for the applicants. We had a lengthy discussion the last time about the definitions and so forth that were just discussed. I too agree that what we've submitted was in compliance, but I suspect that the commission will likely follow the city attorney's interpretation of that. And since we were here the last time, I had hoped that we'd be able to come back with a newly designed plan to seek your approval that would eliminate even that objection. There hadn't been time to do that, but we're still working on that and feel that we will be able to resubmit shortly. But it is important to us that we understand all of the defects that the commission feels are present in the current plan so that we can address all of those with our next submission. So we appreciate your time and look forward to continuing this.
Okay, thank you. Does the commission have any questions of the applicant or of staff? Mr. Guafo? Mr. Shah?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Hockenberry?
Let's see how it goes, and I've got a lot of questions written. One thing I did want clarification, though, before we go into, is any part of these properties in a floodplain?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because I couldn't find that any addressed, yay or nay. And
Rob?
If you're redesigning this, do you want us to continue it? Do you want to come back to it? I don't know what you...
Well, we would like you to vote on the submission. We think that it's compliant, and at this point, I mean, there was a 45-day window of due diligence to be heard. We were heard on day 88. To continue yet again just kind of takes us to the point of finding surprises before an actual vote. So this way, at least, it'll trigger the part of code that will give us, if in fact you vote no, it'll give us at least it'll limit the universe to what we need to correct. And so it won't be quite as much of feeling away in the dark.
So, and maybe Mr. Bascom is the person to answer this question. So I just had one question, and I'd like actually some, as much legal detail as you're able to provide in this case. What I've been struggling with in our city code, and I'm inarticulate in maybe asking this question, but it does not seem to me that the city code is not suggesting that you can't create, it's suggesting that you can't take one lot to create 4 or 5. It seems to me that we have a trick here, and I don't understand what happens to the back parcels in the event there isn't access through parcel B, which seems to be the trigger of the pipe stem
you
ordinance.
mean parcel D back there?
No, I mean parcel B.
B?
So do I have that correctly? The front parcel, the one that's actually on 26th Street, is the
Part of it's B.
there. So the blue one.
Right.
So I don't know how you tease out of the ordinance, and I actually tried to look through the ordinance, but I don't know how you tease out of the ordinance whether or not you can't use multiple lots to create the sum number of lots. Does that make sense?
Well, I think, yeah, but I think I understand where you're coming from. In my view, the sentence that was posted earlier, that you can not create more than 2 pipe stem lots from one existing lot, I think it's clear. It means that if you start with 1 lot, you're limited to creating 2 pipe stems. Here, we're starting with 3 lots, and the plan that I think is in front of you started with 3 lots and creates 4 pipe stem lots. The blue lot there is not, you're not ending up with any pipe stem lot solely within that. You're using other lots in addition to that. So I think in order to read that sentence the way you've been advised to read it by your counsel would require putting an S on the second lot, the word lot at the end of that sentence. And it's not there.
Excuse me, counsel, if I may, I would also read to you the pipe stem lot note as shown on the plat here. Section 48.2 says a lot, the definition from the zoning ordinance says a lot which is occupied or intended to be occupied by a one-family dwelling. Well, the non-conforming substandard lot shown in blue is eliminated entirely, and in its end state, there is no building envelope on that area. So there no question, there are not more than 2 lots formed from that lot, because not only is there not a lot, there's not even a building envelope on that current substandard non-conforming lot.
Okay.
But it seems to me that you're operating, what we're starting out with are not 3 lots. We're starting out with 1 lot. I mean, these lots have not yet been subdivided.
There are 3 lots. There's the one long, deep rectangular lot,
Okay,
which is the neighbor's property, and the Twyfords own the triangle, which is in green on this.
okay, and then this one with the
blue lot is a
house.
separate lot that the
Okay.
Twyfords also own.
But the house of the neighbor, I mean, the lot of the neighbor's property, what I can't figure out is how that gets into this mix without a subdivision actually being done.
I'm sorry, how what gets in the mix?
How that lot gets into the mix, because you're not taking that, you're
Well,
only
just if you'll
taking-
look on the screen, the Pierce Minor lot is in salmon color.
Where the Pierces?
Yes,
Do you have any questions?
So that their property in salmon, you'll see, contributes to what then becomes Lot B.
uh-huh.
So that's the first of the lots in question.
No, I'm with Ruth on this, because to me, it's like you're trying to do sleight of hand. So you currently have these different lots, and then you want to bring them together and then reconfigure them in a new way. And somehow you're trying to skip the middle part where they have to be put together. There is like, you have the existing lots, then you don't have them. But at some point, they have to come together because B has parts of A and B, and C has parts of C. I mean, they're all like, they're different pieces of lots put back together. So at one point, they all have to be together.
Yeah,
Which
this
means
is
then
in
you
fact
have
the,
one lot. And so I think that's what we're struggling with here, is how do you go from these disparate pieces of property to new different lots without having been together at one point in time?
There's no requirement to consolidate this in order to re-subdivide it. This is re-subdividing 3 existing lots into 4 new lots.
But in my mind, the part of that process is you're putting those lots together, and then you're coming up with new lot lines.
Well, the problem is that we're not actually putting them together. We're reconfiguring the lines from the existing lots. So we're going from 3 lots to 4 lots.
Yeah,
We're not going from 3 to 2 to 1
Well,
back
I don't
to
think
4.
that helps us, though,
I don't
with
think
the
that-
more than two.
I don't think that's how I see it, and I don't know if we want to continue with the lot issues, because
Yeah, I think we better
I have
move
3
on.
other questions that are not lot related that I
Okay,
can
go
do
ahead.
later.
Andy?
On the last slide you had, sorry, I know you guys just sat down, but in your example, and maybe this is a question for staff, with that very deep lot, it seems to me, as a scheme to make that happen, is it possible to come and say, hey, I'd like to subdivide this lot into a bunch of lots, and then have that be done, and then come back later and say, hey, now we made 4 out of 5, or, do this math. Is that possible?
I'd like to speak to that. That's our lot. It's a beautiful lot. We're trying to,
He's asking about this hypothetical.
oh, this hypothetical.
I'm just saying in that case, like you say, oh, this obviously can't work, but a run around this would be, hey, we're gonna take this one long lot, we're gonna split it up into lots, we'll wait a week, then we'll come back and we'll say, now we can do 5 pipe stem lots off of 5 lots because we're not getting from one, but it's.
So I'd like to address that. That's
Okay,
what we're trying to avoid with our long lot.
Well, exactly, but I think
We're
that's
trying
the
to
point
avoid
of the
that.
code, is that if you pipe stemmed off your lot, this would all work, and that would make sense because. Well, but there would be less pressure on the parking off-street on this one lot. That's the whole point of this law, I guess is what I'm saying, is that we're trying to prevent a bunch of pipe stems coming off of a little bit of street frontage. And so if you pipe stemmed off of your lot like this, I think you'd sail through no problem, and that would be.
We could, and we're trying to do
I know, but
something better.
I know, but I'm saying, I think there's a reason why this would fly and the proposal won't, and that's because we're putting too many cars off a very small part of the street, and that's the point of the law, which is how I interpret it. That's all.
Russ?
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes.
for the record, sir, would you give your name again for the public hearing?
Michael Pierce, 7,000 North Fairfax Drive.
Thank you.
Russ, do you have any questions? Okay. Melissa? You
I
wanna follow up?
have 3 questions that are not related to the lot, so we'll just go off it for a minute.
Okay.
So in the staff report, the Department of Public Works has issues with the sanitary sewer hookup, and they wanted to see compliance with the requirement to show the proposed sewer laterals. They also were looking for information that showed how you redo the water hookup. There was talks of a fire hydrant. And it looks like state code might suggest that Arlington County needs to be involved in these approvals. Have you guys answered those questions from the staff?
I think you ought to let me answer that. The issues from Public Works really are more appropriately addressed for when we apply for a grading plan. I mean, we can't give them stormwater analysis of what that what it will be.
I
on
know
a
the
di-
stormwater, but I think they're mostly, what I'm concerned about is the sanitary sewer hookups and the water hookup.
Well, again, the placement of those is going to depend on how the houses are placed on the lots that are finished.
It seems to me they're looking for something preliminary, maybe because they don't want to put lots and then they can't provide those services.
Well, no,
So that's fine. Your position is that that would be something you do on grading plan?
yes, I
Okay.
think that would be addressed on the grading plan and building permits and so forth.
So
The-
then what
the-
do you feel about the issue that we perhaps have to have Arlington County involved in this?
I think Arlington County may have to be involved in it, not in terms of what Falls Church approves, but whether the piece of property that's in Arlington is being subdivided and whether they have anything to act upon. So there'd be no reason for Falls Church to withhold acting, waiting for Arlington to act, because Arlington could do the same thing and we'd be stuck in a catch-22. Since this subdivision is essentially all occurring in Falls Church, we were attempting to complete that and then take that to Arlington and to submit to them.
Okay.
But Melissa, could I follow up on that? Because
Go ahead.
doesn't I know, are we using corridor as a term? Are we using pipe stem for the driveway, or what terms are we supposed to use? Corridor. Okay, does the corridor for Lot D, that has to go through the other lot to get there, and it might be affected in Arlington by the fact that that is a corridor.
If this plan were to get approved tonight, in my opinion, we'd submit that to Arlington and say, this has been approved by Falls Church. We would like you to approve it. They can address that. Maybe they would say you can't build on that lot.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
okay. Because I was kind of worried about that. The other thing that I haven't seen anything, we've got all the dimensions for setbacks and everything for the pipe stem lots. Want to be precise in the language we're using. And I've not seen any mock-up of where the building would be located so that we could know where the measurement for the setbacks and everything for the pipe stem lots.
Well, I think there was, on the
There is some.
original
There is-
submission, there are dashed
Okay.
lines on there that show the building envelope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we were told that that was just a drawing, and it maybe not have anything to do with what's going to be built. And also in the code is that we have to make sure the house is facing the street. And so without something that's actually more final, I'm not sure how we're supposed to do that.
And I was very also concerned about the stormwater management throughout that area. We just, of course, passed the stormwater fees are now going through. And would this be under homeowners association to pay for the impervious coverage of all the one's like 97 feet long. Would that be
The concept that we had with the plan that's before you was to do a homeowners association to deal with the common and shared driveways.
See, they all seem to be facing the street.
I don't think whether that would include the stormwater fees or not, we haven't even considered that. We haven't gotten to the point of setting up the
Well,
homeowners
if the
association.
homeowners association is in ownership of the corridors,
It won't be.
they won't be, so
Association would not
they'll
be.
be with the single-family home that's built there?
The homeowners association will be for this is, again, referring to the four-lot subdivision. The homeowners association would be established for the benefit of those 4 lots, and the homeowners association would be established to pay for repairs to the common driveways.
Okay, but I'm referring to who the ownership of the corridors would be,
The individual lot owners.
and would they become aware of the huge expense it's going to be
For what?
for the corridors, for the impervious lot coverage?
Yeah, for the homeowners association would have a budget in which they would know going in what their dues would be and.
That's why I'm
what they would be
asking it.
for, Sure.
because
Yeah.
it would really send those stormwater fees sky high on that.
Well, I don't think we need to be concerned with that
Okay.
at this point. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I just have one.
Yes.
I've been listening to all of the discussions, and it just struck me that I personally would advise you to work with the city, rather than force us to take a vote tonight. Go back, work with the city, and then come back to us.
Well, we've been trying to work with the city and are continuing to do so, but it would be important to these applicants to know what objections currently exist so we know what to address going forward. And the state code requires that.
Any other questions? Okay. Melissa?
Okay, so,
May I make a couple of comments, please?
Oh,
Teresa
certainly.
Twyford, 414 Park Avenue, one of the applicants. One of the issues that we've had is we had our application in nearly 3 months before getting any feedback from the staff at all. It has been difficult. And so we feel like our only option at this point is to force a vote that we know we'll probably not get, but at least at that point we'll have some feedback. We won't be working in a vacuum. We really feel like we have been working in a vacuum at this point. And even since the last Planning Commission meeting, the staff keeps bringing up issues. I would like to ask Mr. Bruce, on this staff report, it says that Public Works does not approve the subdivision, and I've never seen any evidence of that. I've never been told that. And it's not, there are things that the Public Works certainly wants to see done, and for example, the sewer laterals have been done. They're on the preliminary plat. I don't know why that's in there. So of course there are things that, maybe there'll be bonding, maybe there'll be that kind of thing, but they never said that they do not approve of this plan. And then the Arlington issue. I mean, I feel like these items just keep coming up and we need just a list, because we want to comply.
Did you not get a copy of the letter from Arlington?
I did about 2 months after staff got it. And I've known that Arlington site is not currently buildable. We will have to, if it's ever buildable, we will have to go through the Arlington process to, maybe get a unified residential development done, or, who knows? It may never be buildable. But what we're trying to do is just work within the Falls Church. All the subdivision lines are in Falls Church City, and we don't feel like it would be in any way reasonable for Arlington's code to be imposed on the Falls Church City side.
Well, from my reading of the Arlington letter, it sounds as though they're expecting us to work together to come to some arrangement because of shared lot lines and other issues. So, as you know, we can't do anything about that. If they feel as though to make some of the subdivision of the property, that we have to work with them, then because part of it is in Arlington County, then that's something that we'd have to do. You may have a different read on that letter.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we try to cooperate when we have.
Arlington is going to say, yes, we want to say. Of course, they're going to say that,
Yeah.
but all of these subdivision lines are within Falls Church City, and that's for the last year and a half. What we have understood from our Arlington attorney and talking to staff, that has never come up as an issue, as long as the lines are all compliant and within Falls Church City. And we'll deal with Arlington later. About 12 years ago, that Arlington piece was completely landlocked in separate ownership from the Falls Church side. So, maybe it just needs to go back to being that. But
This is
because
really
it just happens
complicated.
to now be in the same ownership,
Yeah.
I feel like we're being kind of put through the ringer with Arlington wanting to say that they want to have a say on the Falls Church side.
Well, I don't think again, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to make my own reading of this letter, but if they are sending us something saying that they feel as though they have some jurisdiction over it, we have to at least take that into consideration. Do you have any further comments?
Anything else? No.
No.
Please, though, I ask, please, when you deny it, please give us specific things that we can remedy, because we're trying to move forward. We're willing to compromise. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Melissa?
Okay, I'll do the motion then. I move that the Planning Commission deny application number 2013-1259 for the following reasons. The proposed subdivision creates too many pipe stems through an existing lot. It does not comply with section 38-34-6 of the subdivision code, which states that only 2 new pipe stem lots shall be permitted to be subdivided from any existing lot. Okay.
And you're not going to, I thought you had a couple other things to say. No?
I thought I just.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this motion? Yes, Russ?
I just want to say, I'm going to vote to deny it based on my interpretation of the code and the legal issues as I understand them and as we were advised at the previous meeting. But I'm very sympathetic because you did give us a drawing that sort of said this is kind of how you would develop it. It was really pretty vague in terms of even how the houses were facing and things like that. I thought that proposal was really reasonable, but I'm unable to sort of get to that spot where you'd be able to do the sketch as you provided because of this legal issue. So I don't have a remedy myself because as I see it, there's too many pipe stems being created from this lot that is accessing the street. But I hope there is some sort of remedy because I think what ultimately you're trying to accomplish is something that's very appealing and would be valuable to the city. So for legal reasons, I'm going to be voting to deny it. But I hope you're able to work with the city and maybe with Arlington to ultimately achieve what you're trying to do.
Ms. Hockenberry?
I want to agree with Russ on that because I do think that that this is, a good proposal if you can work out the whole idea of this pipe step, the corridors, getting to the pipe stem lots. But I just really hope that you can work on something that's going to, it's a difficult piece of land to deal with. And it's very, very confusing as to where it all goes. And I did watch the Granicus presentation from the last meeting, and I have read everything. But I think there's still too many legal questions. We even got just a new legal brief from the attorney, too. So those are my concerns.
Okay. I, too, am going to vote to deny, but I do hope that you can work something out. One of the things that I want to make sure that you have are the letters from the zoning administrator and our Public Works Department, so that you can factor those situations into your next plot plan. I don't know how. I think you're going to have to do something that comes back to us that is different from the original submission, so that we can try to get only two pipe stems. I don't know how you're going to do it, but it seems to us that's the advice that we get from our city attorney, and we have to go along with that because that's who advises us as far as the legal issues here. And even though you may have a different interpretation, we have to go along with the city interpretation. So if you have any problems with getting the information that you need from the planning department, please let me know, and I will try to facilitate for you. I also want to say that I don't think that the water issues are going to be a problem. I mean, I've looked at the elevations on this, and it seems to me that you're at the low end. I don't know how you're going to be, I mean, unless you do grading that's not correct, I don't see how you're going to be affecting other people's properties, if you keep, if you follow all our code. So, good luck in moving ahead. And Ms. G, if you'd call the roll on the motion.
Ms. Hockenberry?
Yes.
Mr. Meeks?
No.
Mr. Rankin?
So I say yes to move to deny.
That's correct.
Yes.
Correct. Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Bodiska?
Yes.
Mr. John?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-1.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, before everybody leaves, I think that one thing I picked up in reading everything is that I think with the parking situation down there should be addressed somehow in that area, that people were saying that, you know, they had metered, or they had parking permits on one side, Arlington doesn't. But with the new Silver Line going in there and the new development around the Silver Line, East Falls Church Station, that is only going to be increased. And it's going to be very difficult because they're not planning any parking
But
over.
that won't have anything to do with this subdivision.
No, I don't,
No,
I
oh,
mean,
okay.
I just said that was another problem in reading things that I saw that we might need to put on a list to address, because it seems like a very serious situation over there. And it will get worse with the Silver Line coming in.
Okay, thank you very much, and good luck in your next submission. We'll look forward to working with you on that. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get a speaker slip. And I did not open it to the public, so, whoops. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Mr. Nicholson, and Mr. Nicholson, I want you to know that we have received your lengthy submission to the Planning Commission, and we have all read it, and so your position is not being ignored, but I would like you to speak on the record if you'd like to do that.
Right. I appreciate that. No, I just had a couple of process questions because I'm a little bit concerned. If there's some informality in this process that's making it difficult for interested persons to sort of stay abreast and keep track of what's going on. For example, in the latest application, the staff report says the applicants have modified their application, don't consider Lot D anymore. Yet you have a plat in front of you that has a Lot D in it. So I would hope that whatever is going to be considered is going to be the plat, the preliminary plat that is submitted, and not a plat that is sort of informally modified by agreement, because then we can't follow what it is.
I understand that, yes.
Okay, and the same issue has to do with this sort of suggestion that there's only one issue here, and therefore that's the only issue we're going to have to deal with next time. You've approved everything else. I don't think that's the case. I mean, the new plat will come in, and it may or may not have issues. And I think every issue should be considered when the new plat comes in. I don't think this record should sort of be left that there's only one thing to do. If they fix the pipe stems, you're bound to approve it. There's some setback issues, as I read it, on the pipe stem lots that I don't think were taken care of. The zoning administrator had noted a 7.5-foot pipe stem that he said was too narrow, that never got fixed on the lot. There are flooding issues that need to be considered, I think, as you know. So I think that everything ought to be wide open.
Well, I think that's a given. With any new application that comes in, all of those things will be reconsidered.
All right, and in that regard, I note that the Planning Commission's rules suggest that that a plat be submitted 28 days in advance of any public hearing, because it's very difficult for us to be chasing this day by day by day by day. So whatever comes in, I hope we get 28 days, because I think that's what the rule says, so that we can look at it and not be sort of trying to rush home from work and figure out what's new today. I mean, it takes some time to work through this stuff.
I understand what you're saying,
And the
yes.
last thing I just wanted to point out, because I think I'm confused about this, I know that this commission does site plan review, and I know when there's site plan review, there's grading issues and so forth. But as I read the subdivision code, which is at issue here, before any final plat can be approved, there are the myriad of Department of Public Works issues that need to be addressed and either constructed and installed or bonded, which is what your DPW said. So there's a suggestion here where we'll get to that at the grading stage, which to me, I don't know if that means someone's thinking, well, we'll approve the subdivision and then we'll do a site approval and we'll figure out how to do the stormwater and the drain water. I think that before a final subdivision plat can be approved, all those stormwater issues need to be either installed or bonded. So I just want to make that clear, that we're not going to get a subdivision and then figure out how to keep the water from running into the neighbors' properties.
We know that, and if you notice, that we'll deal with that at site plan did not come from us.
Well, I understand, but the statements have been made, so I just want to clear that
Okay.
up. So, thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything further? We will move on to, where's my agenda? We will move on to Planning Commission reports. Are there any quick Planning Commission reports? Mr. John?
None
No?
from me.
Okay. Lindy?
Just very quickly, I've attended all the budget meetings and, and every other meeting that's come along, and a very long 4-hour Economic Development Authority meeting that lasted for 4 hours on the Kensington.
You're saying,
4 hours.
And let me just say, I was with Lindy, and I gave
She went
up-
home.
And, well, I went home to put my children to bed, because I promised that I'd come home for that. But I did, I left Lindy on her own there.
But I was concerned about the process in the EDA meeting, I really was. And I've left a message for Mr. Snyder, and I've talked with quite a few other people.
okay, well, maybe we could talk about it
Yep.
at a different time. All right, I'm ready to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is adjourned to our work session with the Kensington. What we're going to do is, it's on. This is going to be taped, and
We adjourned, so. Testing.
Mine's on, it's just very quiet.
Test. Nope. Where we got turned down. They are?
Are they on?
do we have, yes, we do. Welcome, everyone. If you would all go around the table and tell us your name and which board or commission you're from, so that the audience that is going to be watching this tape will know. Yes.
And
Hello, Steve. Nice to see you again. Kathy, welcome.
Chuck Anderson, Architectural Advisory Board. Sharon Friedlander, Architectural Advisory Board. Dr. Burns, CACT.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. This is the first time we've done this, and we're trying to help, trying not to have so many meetings for the applicant as well as for your boards and commissions and for us. So I hope that that you'll jump in when you have a question. This is not going to be such a formal procedure as it would be for a hearing. I think, though, if we maybe raise hand before you jumped in, that would be great, so that we're not all jumping in at the same time. We will start with the applicant. Oh, and, well, I guess you know who we are because we have our name tags here. So we don't have to introduce ourselves. But yeah, we're on the Planning Commission. So will we start with the applicant, or Mr. Snyder, do you have something that you want to? All right. And one of the areas that I'd like to address first is the parking. Do you want to go through with your presentation, and then we'll start with the parking issues that surround this application? Jim?
I did want to say thank you for all board and commission members who are here. I think it's terrific for start all hitting, and thanks to the Planning Commission for spearheading this. So it's great to see this turnout. Also, Paul Stoddard is here, who can give more detailed presentation regarding parking in particular. And so the commission may want to at some point recognize Paul, because he can walk you through some of the thinking that staff has been doing as they've looked at the parking issue.
Okay, so immediately following your presentation, Mr. Novak, then maybe Mr. Stoddard can come up and say a few words. And I also want to say that we received a letter from, a copy of a letter from Recreation and Parks Commission, or Board, about proffer agreements for parks and open space. And so that was a lot of interesting issues that we hadn't discussed before. So that's something that we'll want to be talking about if possible. Mr. Novak?
Okay, thank you, Chair Rogers. My name is Ed Novak. I'm president of Nova Habitat. And with me tonight also is Harley Cook. Harley is one of the principals of Kensington Senior Development. In terms of, just to give you a brief background on my experience in Falls Church, Nova Habitat, we were the developers of the Broadway, the Byron. I am involved as an investor and board member of Mad Fox Brewing Company. I was formerly vice president of development for Marriott Senior Living, and in fact, the Broadway, for those of you who might recall many years ago, was originally approved for an assisted living project on the side of the Broadway. Nova Habitat acquired that site when Marriott abandoned those plans and got reapproved for the Broadway mixed-use project. We've contracted to purchase the Burger King property in January of 2013. Kensington Senior Living, our partners, include Harley Cook, Tiffany Tomaso, Dave Fader, and Dan Gorham. They are all the former COO, CEO, CFO, and development head of Sunrise Senior Living. They have several current projects, Kensington Park in Kensington, Maryland, and Kensington of White Plains, and they also have 2 projects under construction, in California, in Sierra Madre, and in Redwood City. Just to give you a quick overview of the proposed project, it is an assisted living residence over ground floor retail. It's a 5-story building with 88 units of assisted living. It will be licensed by the state of Virginia as an assisted living facility. It will house approximately 105 to 110 residents. In terms of the retail space, there's a corner cafe that wraps around the corner of Broad and North Lee Street. There's an art gallery to the west towards the Hilton Garden Inn side of the building. All the parking is screened and under and around the building. And the access to that parking and the pedestrian or the vehicular access is limited to Lee Street. Just a quick overview, since this question did come up at the EDA, in terms of what is assisted living. Assisted living really describes 24-hour a day, 365-day a year care, supervision, and assistance with the activities of daily living. The residents of assisted living may have various needs in terms of bathing, dressing, grooming, meals preparation, medication assistance. That is what assisted living is. It is licensed by the Virginia Department of Health. In terms of the demographics, we would expect the average age of our residents to be in the average range of 80 to 85 and up. The average length of stay in assisted living is approximately 2 years. While that describes the resident, the customer for assisted living is typically an adult child, 45 to 64 years old, that desires to have the elderly parent nearby. We would be providing multiple levels of care from basic assisted living through what we refer to as memory care and Alzheimer's care. The resident units themselves in the project will be from 325 to 570 square feet, obviously relatively small, but approximately half of the building space is all of the community areas in terms of dining, activities, lounges, and various activities. Kensington Senior Living has a highly personalized approach to caring for the resident needs and preferences. It is the antithesis of what we would think of as institutionalized care in a nursing home, which is really designed for staff efficiency. In terms of a quick overview of the architectural and streetscape, again, the initial application was submitted for a 5-story building in June of 2013. We've made many revisions that have been suggested by the planning director, staff, the planning board, city council, including increasing the use of brick. We've increased the details around all 4 sides of the building. We've added a clock tower. This is just some examples of what we've done. We've wrapped the outdoor seating at the retail level around Lee Street. We refined the layout of the ground floor plan. We've added bike racks. Also, kind of importantly, we've increased the initial application had the building within 14 feet of Broad Street. We've increased the building setback to 20 to 27 feet to permit a minimum of a 10-foot wide clear sidewalk on Broad Street. Again, this is the overview of the building in perspective. Just to point out that this is the cafe area that wraps around with the outdoor seating raised. Broad Street slopes down from west to east. So this is at-grade entrance to the cafe, and this is the main entrance to the lobby of the building. But as you go down, we hold the patio to the level of the cafe, so it does create a retaining wall and a raised patio there. This would be the art gallery space that's being proposed. And again, the entrance to the building and all the parking is off of North Lee Street at the far end of the site. The second floor and above floors are all the assisted living units. This is the Broad Street elevation. We have 3 different types of brick interspersed in the design. The roof is a combination of architectural shingles and metal roof. A lot of details in terms of the dental work and coping at the roof level. The North Lee Street elevation, and again, here's your entrance to the parking, the screened parking area, garage behind there. Again, the wraparound of the outdoor patio. This area up here is set back. This is really kind of a U-shaped building. These are protruding out. These wings are protruding out. This is set back. This creates an outdoor activities area for the residents, accessible on the second floor of the building, near the main dining room. So they have a nice, fairly large, several thousand square feet outdoor activities area that's protected and safe. This is the west elevation, looking at it from Hilton Garden Inn. Again, it's U-shaped in this direction with the end wings coming out, and this is set back. And then the rear elevation, north elevation, that would be viewed, if you could, from Park, although there are the properties between us and Park. And that, again, carries on the theme of the architecture from the front of the building, where we have 3 different types of brick, all carried through with the dental work around the roof structure. This is a site plan to give you, feel for what the footprint of the building is like. Again, on the second floor, the building actually comes back following this line, so that the second floor is set back, and you have that outdoor courtyard area there. Again, just to point out in terms of the sections for the Lee Street and for West Broad Street, first on West Broad, we are moving the street planters to the edge of the street, and they are going to be flush with the sidewalk. Sidewalk in this area, this is where the art gallery is, so the proposed building setback is about 21.5 feet. The sidewalk is 15 feet wide at that point. When you get to the cafe area, the building is set back even further. It's almost 27 feet back. There's a 10-foot raised patio. That still leaves 10 feet clear sidewalk, and then the street planters there. On North Lee Street, there is a large underground stormwater pipe that runs along North Lee Street, right close to the edge of curb, which services about a 40-acre watershed above. So that remains, so we put the sidewalk out to the street curb and have the streetscape and planters tighter to the building, which works well in terms of screening the building. Again, this sidewalk there is shown as I believe this is 8 or 9 foot sidewalk. In terms of the parking, we know that's a concern and something we've given a lot of consideration to. We've had an independent parking evaluation study that was done by a consultant following the International Transportation Engineers standards. They recommended, or they came up with a maximum need at peak times of 51 spaces. The zoning code for assisted living in the City of Falls Church is not based upon those ITE standards, and appears to assume that residents would drive. Our proposal is that the Kensington is seeking a waiver from the city code and approval of the ITE peaks demand, and our residents do not drive. We have submitted separately and have copies for you after the meeting of a separate transportation and parking management plan. Just to give you some of the highlights of that plan, residents will not have cars. We are going to put that into our resident agreement provision. For employees, where we'll have approximately 40 employees at the very peak employment time, which is from approximately 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., we will be providing, and that would be 40 employees at that time. We've estimated that would result in 23 cars. We are going to provide free van transportation for employees to and from Metro at the 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. major shift changes. We are going to pay employees $100 a month for those that elect to take public transportation. We will pay employees $50 a month, all the employees that would carpool bicycle or walk to work. Employees, those that do drive, would be prohibited from parking on public streets. We'll write that into the employment agreement. And also, in terms of the retail, we are going to designate 8 short-term spaces reserved for retail customers during business hours. That is not all the retail parking. There are at least 17 other parking spaces that will be available for retail, but we are going to have 8 of them separately designated for short 30 to 60 minute time periods to allow for rapid turnover of those retail spaces. And to see how this all works, in terms of the plan, again, coming in off of North Lee Street, we have a circular path in the parking garage. These are not designated, but we have identified that we would have employees. The 23 employee parking spaces consist of these spaces in red, and this also includes employees by the way of the retail space, so there's actually 26. And then also included in there are these spaces here in, hard to tell, but it's an orange color. That is what we would anticipate would be spaces that we would reserve for carpools. All of the 8 designated short-term retail spaces are in blue here. The yellow spaces are available for retail guests and visitors to the assisted living residence. And again, there's approximately 17 of those. And we do have handicap parking spaces as well, available to anyone. Just to point out again, this goes in a circular pattern. These are full 23-foot wide drive aisles. In this area, it's much larger. It's approximately 30 feet, and that allows for residents to be dropped off and picked up, but still allow ample room to go by in terms of free traffic flow in and out of the garage. We understand there are concerns with other underground parking structures in the city where the spaces are too narrow and the drive aisles are dead end. We certainly don't have any of that. And importantly, 80% of our parking spaces are a clear 9 feet wide or wider. 20% of the spaces are a clear 8.5 feet wide or wider. When I say clear, I mean clear of any obstructions. So where there are columns, we're not measuring to the center of the column, we're measuring from the face of the column out. So, and in the city code, it would allow for spaces as narrow as 8.5 feet wide to be intruded by up to 1 foot by columns. So you can effectively have clear 7.5 to 8 foot wide spaces. We have none of those. Everything is 8.5 feet wide and wider, 80% 9 feet wide and wider. Also, in the parking area, we have covered bike racks here. These would be for employees of at least 10 bicycles there. We have another bike rack here outside that would be used for patrons of the retail or visitors, and another 10 bicycle spaces there, Class 3 bicycle racks. Based upon our traffic demand study, we believe that we have made provisions where our peak parking will actually be, well less than what the capacity is of the garage. That would occur, this is during weekdays, that would occur at 11 a.m., where our employees designated in the red would be the highest, our visitors would be the highest, the customers for the cafe would be the highest. So, and that peaks at 42 spaces. So this is an average parked cars by hour during the week. On weekends, the employment is approximately 10 employees less during the peak periods. So naturally, we would expect the weekends to have relatively lower employee parking and therefore more available for retail customers and visitors. In terms of the retail space, again, Corner Cafe with outdoor seating, it's approximately 1,900 square feet of interior space, with the outdoor seating being another 1,000 square feet. We have 16-foot 4-to-4 height, which will allow for a finished ceiling height of 13 to 14 feet in the cafe. We're providing full ventilation to whatever the tenant's requirements are. We have done some test fits by Street Sense, Dunkin' Donuts, and Spring Mill Bread Company, all of which have indicated that they were very satisfied with the way the space laid out. The gallery space is 1,100 square feet. The cafe and gallery are connected through the entry foyer to the building, which I'll show you in a second. We're providing restrooms, one set of restrooms that will serve both spaces, and we're locating those behind the cafe, so we're eliminating the need for each space to have its own separate restrooms. We believe that we're providing the maximum amount of retail that is feasible and marketable given the small site. More importantly, we're committed to achieving a very high quality of retail and gallery space to create the vibrancy and the pedestrian activity that the city wants. So again, here in a blow-up, again, the cafe space, this is the interior outline of the space. These are the restrooms that will be able to be accessed directly from the cafe, but also through a separate entrance from the lobby and foyer area, such that the gallery, patrons of the gallery can come over and utilize those restrooms. Again, the outdoor seating that wraps around and steps leading up to it, so there's entrances to the cafe here, possibly here, definitely here. The main entrance in the foyer for the residential units or the assisted living units, 2 resident elevators, and then the gallery space here. And we have an electrical room here with the transformers that are going to be serving both our property and, when we underground the utilities, is effectively serving the other side of Broad Street. We're accommodating that transformer on our site, since until those properties get redeveloped, there really isn't a logical place to put the surface mounted transformer over there. In terms of other items, as I said, on the utilities, we are committed to undergrounding on the north side of Broad Street for our entire frontage. We're going to accommodate a transformer on our property to service the south side, and we are working with Public Works and Dominion Virginia Power to evaluate the options for a comprehensive solution. In terms of affordable units, again, it's important to understand that assisted living is really a healthcare service, not a housing product. Over 80% of the fees that the residents pay goes directly to 24-hour staffing and services that are being provided. Approximately 20% goes to, if you want to consider it that, rent for housing. Nonetheless, we are proposing to price up to 6 of our assisted living beds at what would be the equivalent of $1,300 per month less than the pro rata assisted living fee for that unit, effectively making the rent zero. And that's up to twice what the monthly subsidy has been for affordable dwelling units in other rental projects. In terms of environmental, we have committed to LEED Silver certification. In terms of the comprehensive plan, I think we feel that this is very important, that the city's comprehensive plan does specifically recommend that the city provide a wide range of housing to house various demographic segments of the population. As I'm sure many of you know, the seniors in need of assisted living is one of the most rapidly growing demographic segments of the population in general, and we are addressing that need. In terms of economic impact, again, I think it's important to note that this is 100% commercial development. The assisted living is categorized in the City of Falls Church as under the B-Poll tax and licensing as healthcare and professional services. We will have over 75 full-time equivalent employees covering 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We will be paying B-Poll taxes on gross receipts tax on the equivalent of over $8 million in annual revenues once the project is stabilized. We will be paying personal property tax on the FF&E. And the cafe and retail space itself, in terms of 3,000 square feet plus 1,000 square feet of outdoor seating, exceeds the existing Burger King, which is approximately 2,835 square feet. We believe this is a very high value and low impact project for the city. I will describe in a minute how we got to the $18 million assessment, but based upon an $18 million assessment, the project would be valued at that assessment equates to $23 million an acre on the 3/4 of an acre site. Upon completion, that would be the highest commercial assessment per acre in the city. It will be providing triple the net tax revenues of the existing Burger King. We believe it's a dramatic architectural improvement and a visually attractive environment compared to a fast food pad site. And yet we'll be generating less traffic than the existing Burger King, which derives over 50% of its sales from the drive-through window. And obviously will have no impact on school enrollment. This is just a quick summary of some of the other commercial projects in the city in terms of the total tax assessment and the assessment per acre. So in the light green is the total tax assessment. In the dark green is the assessment per acre. And again, I'll just take an example of a commercial building that we are all familiar with, the tax analyst building. It has a total tax assessment of approximately $16 million. On a per acre basis, that's the equivalent of $10,800,000. In our case, we will be on a 3/4 of an acre site, $18 million with a tax assessment per acre of over $23 million, just under 2.5 times what the tax analyst building is equivalent to. How we arrived at this was through a supplemental tax agreement with the city. It's been referred to, it will no longer be called, but it's been referred to as a pilot. You may have heard of that, payment in lieu of taxes. It's really a payment in addition to taxes. The issue that has come up when we first made application to the city, or first started discussing making application to the city, was a concern that assisted living was not an attractive tax generator for the city. And that was because the only other assisted living facility in the city, Sunrise of Falls Church, has a very low assessment of $4.6 million. We didn't understand why that was the case, met with the tax assessor and learned that it was due to what he believes is a requirement that he assess the Sunrise assisted living on a net income basis, as opposed to a cost or a sales or a replacement cost basis. We discussed that, but he felt quite strongly that that's what he needed to assess assisted living, the procedure by which he needed to assess assisted living. So we met with the city staff and the city manager, and our intent with our supplemental tax agreement is that we're voluntarily providing a supplemental payment to the city in addition to the taxes that are assessed, that would then take the total payment and equate that to a cost-based assessment volunteered by us. And that volunteer is at $18 million of assessment, which is roughly equivalent to what the land and construction costs as a brand new project that our project would generate. That, however, is roughly 4 times what the current assessment of Sunrise is. That $18 million assessment equates to a $235,000 a year annual payment, which again, we would be paying our property taxes as to whatever they are assessed and subtract from the $235,000 and make that additional payment to the city to get it up to $235,000. That is, by the way, only for property taxes. The B-poll taxes, the personal property taxes, and the whatever meals tax would be generated from the cafe. That's all in addition to that $235,000. The $235,000 is only towards property taxes. So the total revenues to the city, including all of those other taxes, is approximately $313,000 a year. And also, there were some concerns. The city is protected. This is a supplemental payment. It is not a payment in lieu of. So in any case, if the future assessment methodology changes, other things change such that the future assessment for our assisted living residents is higher, then we pay the higher amount. We would never pay less than the assessment. There's been some discussion as well, especially at the EDA, with regards to some feelings that this was not, perhaps that this was a good project and supported by some, but they didn't feel that it was the highest and best use of the site. I have subsequently submitted this chart and have volunteered to work with City Economic Development staff, Rick and Becky, from the staff, because it is our strong opinion that the Kensington is the highest and best use of the site, given that we're talking about a 3/4 of an acre site that currently is a pad site for a Burger King drive-through restaurant. In terms of some of the other alternatives we looked at, we could look at a mixed-use project, a residential mixed-use project of either apartment or condominiums. We looked at a freestanding office building with the significant parking requirements that go along with that. Obviously we could keep the Burger King or replace it with another fast food. We looked at a full-service restaurant, but again, the parking requirements for that are very significant. And we looked at a non-food retail pad. None of those uses, from my analysis, can generate the kind of net tax revenues that the city will get from the Kensington. Several of them are questionable in terms of whether they're even feasible, given the current market conditions and financing requirements. But none of them, whether feasible or not, do we feel would generate a higher taxes than the Kensington. Obviously, we're not going to look at a hotel right next to Hilton Garden Inn. Hotels do have rooms tax, but even the Hilton Garden Inn is on a 1.1 acre site and utilizes approximately half of the site area for an above-grade deck on the back of the property. So, and we don't have that luxury, and nor would we want to necessarily do above-grade parking. So, that is completion of my presentation. Certainly happy to answer any questions, or if you want to have Paul Stoddart come up at this point and discuss the parking.
Why don't we have Paul come up, and then we'll get into questions on parking.
If I could, I have some things I'd like to pass out. I'm not sure. Thank you. Okay. Now. All right. So what you have in front of you is it's a memo that I put together, and I sent it over to Lauren, who is the case manager on this project. And what I'm going to do is just walk through some of the key points in this memo. The memo outlines sort of the staff philosophy that we've been looking at in terms of the parking requirements and the Transportation Demand Management Program, or TDM program.
Paul, before you go any
Yes.
further, has the applicant received this memo as well?
Yes, this
Okay.
is the, do we have an extra copy so I can just make sure he's got the right one? So to begin, I want to say thank you to the development team that they came in with this, an original TDM plan. We looked at it. We had some suggestions. They came in with an updated TDM plan. We looked at it. We had some suggestions. They came in with an updated TDM plan. So it's been an evolving process, and that sort of communication, I think, is how we're eventually going to get to something that works for this site. There is policy guidance for trying to put together a TDM plan. The comprehensive plan has a specific goal of optimizing parking as developments come in and trying to reduce the demand for travel by instead creating something that's friendly not only to automobile travel, but pedestrian, transit, bicycle travel as well. So in terms of the key points that I'm going to hit in this memo, one is this idea of pricing transportation options. Pricing has a big impact in what people choose to do. Right now, the city typically provides free parking to anyone that wants to visit the city. But that parking is not free to use, and that's a benefit that people receive if they choose to drive. But if they choose other modes, there isn't necessarily a benefit that goes along with that. And so we can get to something called the parking cash out, which they talked about in the presentation, the idea of giving a cash benefit to people who elect to use a different mode of transportation. So what you're trying to do is to level the playing field. Instead of giving a benefit for just one mode, give a benefit for all modes. As they showed in their analysis of the parking, the peak demand for parking is less than the capacity that's in the garage. One thing we've talked about is this idea of somehow getting a survey of similar sites to get a sense on whether that mode share that they're trying to hit, that target mode share of how many people are going to drive alone, how many people are going to take transit, how many people are going to take carpool, is that realistic for this site? And then the third thing is an escalation clause. So if you put this agreement into effect and then it doesn't work, what's your out? How do you repair that situation? And what you can do is have an escalation clause where the financial incentive that you give people to choose other modes of transportation goes up over time, with the idea that eventually the price will be high enough that people will elect to get there by modes other than driving alone. So let's see. So there's an overview of the parking supply that's on site. They went over this in their presentation. They noted that there are 53 spaces in their parking structure. There are an additional, and they didn't mention these, but there are an additional 5 spaces that are parallel spots that are along North Lee Street, adjacent to the facility. And then bicycle parking, like they said, a total of 20 bicycle parking spots, 10 inside the garage, 10 outside the garage. I do want to mention this. Early on in the presentation, do you have a floor plan of the parking layout that we can talk about?
There. Is that the one?
Yep, that's the one. So if you look at the that center island, yep. So if you look at the center island, there are these 2 extra deep parking spaces here. In an earlier version, there was talk of putting a secured bicycle parking facility in there, and it fits just fine. The problem is there's no way to get to it without removing an automobile parking space. So that's something that I wanted to punt up to the Planning Commission and the CACT to get a sense of what was the sense in the city about perhaps removing one of these automobile parking spaces and getting probably 10 to 20 secured bicycle parking spots inside the facility.
Paul, if we don't remove one of them, currently there's no secured park, right?
Right. The parking that's proposed here, there are the 10 spots here and the 10 spots out here. These 10 spots are intended to be highly visible such that people who are visiting the site by bike would be able to quickly find the bike parking and use it easily. These 10 spots here, they're inside the garage, but they're not secured inside of any sort of a room or a locked cage or anything like that. But the idea is that they are at least covered from the elements, so people who did want to leave them there for more than an hour or so would probably want to stick them inside the garage to keep them dry and safe from the elements. In terms of parking demand, there's a chart at the back of the table, and I'm going to explain how I got to that chart. It looks very similar to this chart here. The idea in sort of getting a sense of how you go about optimizing your parking supply is by breaking down what's your demand for parking. And what they've done is segmented it by different use. So how are employees to the assisted living facility going to get there? How are employees to the cafe going to get there? How are customers to the cafe going to get there? And what you're trying to do is get a sense of what's the demand to travel to the site by these different groups. And then within each of these groups, what do we think the mode share of those people is going to be? How do we expect them to get there? And so then I stepped through all the same things that they did in terms of their breakdown of how many people are going to go, how many cars are they going to have, how are we going to get there. And then the one real segment of this sort of breakdown to talk about is the assisted living employees. You'll see that the target mode share that they're trying to hit is 33% driving alone, 42% carpooling, and then 25% using transit or bike. There are statistics available on how existing city employees, people who work in the city, get here, what their mode share is. It's different from what they're proposing here. Currently people who work in the city, 74% of them drive alone and 12% carpool, and then the other, 86? So 14% use something like walk or bike, or they work at home or something like that. So the proposed mode share here is very different from what's included in the current statistics. The question is then, is that something that's feasible for this city? Is that something that's reachable? The developer has said that in other projects that is sort of the mode share that they're seeing at these other projects. So that sort of opens up the door that this might be possible at this site as well. How do you make sure that happens? It gets back to the idea of pricing transportation, that if you provide everyone free parking, you should expect everyone to go ahead and drive to the site. When you start providing these mix of financial incentives and you start raising the incentive for other modes, eventually people are going to gravitate towards those things. I think it's also important to remember that these aren't necessarily random employees that are going to work at this site, that they may be employees that are attracted to work here because there's a transit benefit. So you're not just trying to pick, 40 employees, 44 employees a peak? You're not trying to get a random 44 employees that would agree to use transit. You're trying to get a specific set of employees that would ride transit because they want to ride transit and because they're being incentivized to ride transit. And so I produced the same chart with lines, they produced it with bars, but what it shows that there's, as this chart shows here, that there's, even at their estimated peak demand, there's a capacity here still of unused spaces between what's available inside the garage, and remember there are another 5 spots outside the garage, so there is still a gap here between what's available in parking supply and what's needed in parking demand. I do think that there is some further investigation that needs to be made. I don't think you necessarily want to accept it as is and put a stamp of approval on it. I think the two sort of key pieces here, all of this demand is based on sort of other sites, but I think you'd want to get an actual survey of those other sites. You want to get numbers there just to verify that what's sort of believed to be going on at those other sites is what's actually going on at those other sites. And how you pick those facilities would have to do with their location to the metro, the kind of bus service they have, the hours of operation, the size of the facilities, the built environment they're in, so you'd want to be careful about how you pick your comparators. So again, just to recap the memo, one, there is policy guidance in the city's comprehensive plan for optimizing parking. And then you have a question of, is the travel demand accurate? And that's, I think you would want to answer that through a survey. Is the projected mode share accurate, or is it achievable? And I think that's where the TDM plan gets you there. Do you think the TDM, as it's structured, is going to get you to that target mode share? And even if it doesn't, is that escalation clause going to be enough to cover sort of the city's concerns? Yes.
One question. On the north, on North Lee Street, the parking that you indicated on that side, is that parking guaranteed? Is it parking that is basically just allocated to this building, or is it shared parking? Anybody can park there?
Anyone can park there.
Okay, so that's not really, it cannot be considered as part of the project because it's street parking.
And you'll see in the developer's counts, they don't include it in that. But I think from the purpose of sort of the city's perspective of optimizing parking, I don't think you want to get into the habit of making sure that all of the parking demand for every building fits underneath the building. Then you sort of left that resource that is on-street parking unused. So you want to sort of keep in mind that that's something out there and you want to be taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I think we definitely want to make sure that on-street parking is available to help support retail and existing uses or new uses that have their own parking. And so one of the questions here, and there's also parking on the other side of Lee Street, that parking timing, I think now it's presently 2 hours, that be adjusted in an optimal way so that parking turnover matches the retail uses that you're trying to encourage turnover for.
I have a follow-up to that. I know we've talked about finding various ways to accommodate parking within the city, et cetera. Has this project considered looking at shared parking with any of the other commercial buildings around? In case there's overflow if they need the overflow parking, has there been that, has anyone looked at that?
Ed, do you want to speak to that?
Not formally yet. I mean, we're very friendly with Hilton Garden Inn. And one of the things that we are considering doing is, proposing to, and they will have a shuttle van as well for their guests. So one of the things that we're looking at is sharing the idea of picking up employees at Metro, at our shift changes, which would somewhat coincide with theirs. My understanding is that, they're parking at about one space per hotel room is going to be fairly heavily utilized at night. They peak at night. And we tend to peak during the day or in the early evening. So there may be some opportunity there. And certainly, we can look at it for special events, things like that. But as of right now, I mean, our comfort level is that even with our projected, if we achieve the mode share target that we want to achieve, we should have ample excess capacity most of the time in our garage.
I've got a question for Paul, if I may.
Okay.
Is the parking on the other side of Lee, is that going to be still restricted for the Broadway?
Is the parking on Lee restricted for Broadway, or is it
No.
open just 2 hours?
I don't believe it's restricted. I think it's just open parking, but the question of what would be the appropriate length of time, there's signing that governs typically how long someone may park. I think it's presently 2 hours.
I think 2 hours is the smallest block of time the city generally has, unless it's like a...
Although there are many places that have shorter time periods than that, both in private lots and other jurisdictions who reduce the time period for parking in high turnover areas.
I have a quick question.
Okay, go ahead.
I noticed in your presentation, it says estimated parking demand, but in the developers' presentation, it says average parking demand. That's the average. What, or should we upward or lower down?
Oh, in terms of what's the variability of this and the sensitivity of this from the average to the sort of peak?
Well, this does represent, in terms of the peak, that does represent the peak. I guess in terms of, we did this in terms of average parked cars by hour by weekday. There's the ITE study assumed a 95 percentile when it came up with 51 spaces. So the 51 spaces, and we actually have 53, but the 51 spaces, you could think of as a 95 percentile. This is an average, but again, when we look at an average, you would say that the average here would be 25 or 26 spaces total over the course of a day. We're doing it in terms of the peak time and using that as the peak.
Melissa?
Yeah, no, one thing I do find confusing, although it doesn't really matter because the other uses are down, but I don't think the way the gallery is shown, at least on the estimated parking demand chart that you have, you guys show the gallery is peaking in the middle of the day. Now, if this gallery is used like Falls Church Arts uses gallery space now, it actually peaks at night, like between 7 and 10 p.m. That's where most of their events are, which is okay because the other ones are coming down at that point. And also with the cafe, I think if it's a cafe that has dinner, they may have a different peak as well that this chart reflects. That's just my experience of a gallery is it's a nighttime function, which doesn't hurt because it actually would give more, if it's more nighttime, it would give more capacity during the day and use the night wear.
Right, you've shifted the use into something where they even have less demand.
Right, because I just don't see galleries being used in the middle of the day that much.
Yep, and I think in terms of the cafe, my understanding is that's what's being envisioned is something that would be used more during the breakfast, sort of breakfast and early lunch.
Yeah, it just counts on what ends up being in there.
Right.
Andy?
One question, I have a couple questions, hopefully quick ones. One, I think I read a proffer somewhere where at one point it was going to be a bus stop, and then they switched that to the van to the metro. I was wondering if where the nearest bus stop is now, because I mean, I suspect some of these people will actually be commuting by bus, and getting a van down to the metro station is not really going to be a big benefit to them. Is there already a bus stop somewhat nearby?
Yeah, I think there is a bus stop either at this corner or very close to this corner. Ed, do you remember the closest bus stop?
But there's not like a shelter. We don't.
No, there's,
Yeah.
Okay.
to the east, there are shelters. To the west, there's a stop on the other side of Broad at Oak, I believe.
Yeah, I do think we looked preliminarily at the possibility of fitting a shelter into the site, and we found that it was going to either interfere with it was either going to interfere with the pedestrian sort of clear space or with the visibility to the cafe, neither of which were going to make the project work as well. The other thing, I think the van or shuttle service will be a real value. I think when they discuss the bus service that's on Route 7 today, the time between buses is about 29 minutes at its longest wait, but the trip to the metro is only 7 minutes. So you would expect to wait about 15 minutes for the bus for a 7-minute trip. So that van shuttle service being available on site actually cuts your travel time in a third.
Yeah, I was just thinking if they were never getting on the train, they're just on the bus.
Right.
And then, if this thing goes up and, be there for 20, 30 years, for these kinds of programs like, paying people to take public transportation, how is that monitored or enforced, 10 years from now when all of us aren't paying attention anymore? Are these things normally audited, or they have to submit something every year? Do you know?
So Arlington County has a very robust TDM program, and I think that's certainly a resource that we could reach out to. They've been very helpful as we've sort of discovered things in the city that they may have already tackled over in the county line, on their side of the county line. We can certainly look to them for what their experience is. One of the things that they do is they make an easily accessible public record of all their negotiated TDM plans. So on the Arlington County website, there's a pull-down menu where you can look at any TDM plan that's been negotiated for any development in the county. And that's a way that you can just generally make people aware of what's going on.
And then my last question is, since it's, it seems like a lot of this depends on getting higher participation in some of these alternate methods than we see, but we think it'll work because of the payments.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned in there, maybe those payments should escalate over time, things get more expensive. Is there any model where those payments could escalate at least a little bit should the system not be performing as well? You're not getting as many people converting to public transportation. Maybe we got to bump it up from 100 to 110, 120.
Well, so that's what was included in this memo, and actually since I've authored this, the development team has actually responded and said that they would look at, if they're not hitting their mode share, either exercising that escalation clause or looking at some other way to mitigate those impacts. And I think we've already talked about some of those other ways. Maybe it would be leasing space in garages nearby that are going unused. So I think the idea is you want to set up agreements and then have this sort of capacity to adjust it over time.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this might be for Mr. Novak. Will the van that says go to the metro, will that be available to the residents, visitors as well?
I'm sorry, the resident visitors?
Residents.
Our children.
To be honest with you, I hadn't considered that. I mean, we would expect most of the visitors would be driving. But certainly if, if there were visitors that needed a shuttle ride from the metro, we could certainly look at that. Mm-hmm.
Charlie.
First, I know it's TDM, park issue.
Well, there certainly, residents will not be leaving the facility by themselves. So the question would be, you know, how much would they be utilizing those parks with family members or staff or whatever? You know, unfortunately, with assisted living, you know, the residents themselves are fairly frail. So that is why we've created the second floor outdoor activity area with, and it's going to be heavily planted and, you know, kind of a green space up there for the residents. So I think that certainly, you know, I mean, would residents be brought by, you know, family members to, you know, the farmer's market on a Saturday or something like that? Certainly that, you know, we'd like to see that happen, and we do expect a large number of visitors. We expect that partly because that is who our customers are. We would expect upwards of 1,600 to 2,000 visitors per month. So residents will be getting a lot of visitation, and certainly we'd hope some of them would take advantage of the park facilities that the city has. But again, we're talking about fairly frail 80 to 85-year-old and up residents. So. Right.
So I expect that there will be some, you talk about farmers market and Cherryville, it's not that far away. We know this is, at least from the rec and parks, we're at the end of the process, and we'd like to see what Ms. Rogers referenced was that park and rec would be like to be involved in development early on. So we have some input before it comes to when you're at the end of the stage. A lot of development that's done around here. There's contributions that are made to a lot of facilities, schools, recs and parks. Has there been any thought given to making a contribution to the rec and parks of our area for the purchase of open space for the improvements that we have planned?
Not to date.
Tim? Are you finished, Charlie?
If you considered putting any of the parking spaces for EV charging or charging station?
Good question. I don't think we have.
And if you don't have a full-fledged charging station, which I know would be pricey, you consider just laying the conduit so that at some point in time, as that materializes, the demand materializes, you won't have to go back.
Sure. We would be happy to do that.
Can I just ask a quick question? Where are you in the process? So it has sort of gone, can you just explain where you are? Because I'm completely confused by that.
You might not be the only one. We had our first reading on the special exception last month, and we expect to, and so we're now out to the boards and commissions for comments and reviews. The project is, the initial project was required a special exception for the height. The zoning was changed after we made our initial application, so there's also a conditional use permit that is going in tandem with the special exception though, so it's not a separate review process. And we expect to be back in front of the city council, I believe, Jim, it was May 12th?
Well, the 5th is their work session.
5th is their work session, and then May 12th for second reading.
But is this going back to the EDC, or is this going back to the council?
No, this will go to a work session with city council. Prior to that, there would be a presentation and hearing by the planning commission, and then ultimately a second reading by city council.
Check. And just a last follow-up question. Can you, without going into agonizing detail, can you just expand on the gallery space, what you had in mind? Is that a not-for-profit? Is that a new not-for-profit, existing not-for-profit? Is that part of the city, not part of the city, et cetera?
Well, yes. We are in discussions, and we anticipate it will be with Falls Church Arts. And we are, looking to coordinate their programs to have a gallery and artist space with, frankly, a lot of, I mean, we would have integrated with also our residents, some of whom are likely to be amateur artists or even professional artists. So it's going to be the space is on the ground floor of the building, but we hope to integrate it into the entire assisted living program.
Addison?
My question is about, what accommodations do you have for deliveries? I didn't notice those in your presentation.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we have a off-street loading. This is the loading area. So we have trash and loading here. There's a freight elevator here. So all the loading and unloading of trash and deliveries would be in this area.
All the truck traffic would be expected to go on the east side.
Correct. Yeah, there are no, once we develop, there are no vehicular access from West Broad.
Paul, did you have something?
What is the clear walkway on Lee Street?
I'm going to look at my notes. I believe it is 8 feet, but I can double check.
You say clear walkway, that's no intrusion by Albert
Correct, absolutely. And by the way, the other thing that we're doing here is we're bumping out Lee Street, and we're looking at the feasibility of doing it on both sides to create a shorter pedestrian crosswalk.
Sharon, did you have anything on AAB? Or on the architectural details, anything?
Thank you for asking. Yes, I did want to make note that when we were reviewing this, we've had an opportunity to take a look at the elevations and the preliminary package design first, I don't know, a couple months ago. And one of our comments was that the brick just seemed very overwhelming for rising in height so much as it is. And I know that as we were talking about Lee Street and then the properties behind it that are on Park, that as you come by Park, those are a lot smaller in scale. And I don't believe that they're brick. I think that they're more residential wood frame plantings. And I think we were talking about pulling at least the back part of that to relate a little bit better with those properties back there and speak to them. I do notice that in the courtyard, he's lighting that up and brought in lighter colors so it's not so dark here. But I think something done to kind of lighten it a little bit on the street. So heavy with that dark brick. The other thing I wanted to note as well was just a concern about the street trees along North Lee in your cross section, across that sidewalk. It's
Right.
showing that you couldn't put the street trees out towards the street because you have that storm drain limit.
Correct.
Have you given consideration to the type of tree being so close to the building, whether or not it will actually survive for a long period of time there?
Well, and actually they're shown as trees, but we expect them to be pretty columnar, column in shape, column form. Losing my words here. Columnar in shape, but shrubs. So it's going to be mostly screening, and we do have the second floor of the building sets back at that point as well. So if there is a little bit of a canopy, it can overhang. I mean, it looks like it's up against the building, but there is a setback starting at about 15 feet up. And by the way, to confirm, the answer to the question is it is an 8-foot sidewalk.
Oh, sorry, Russ, and then Russ?
Yeah.
Did you want to follow up, Sharon?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just have another comment.
Okay. Russ?
What size are the units on the upper, 3 or 4 floors?
The actual resident units range from approximately 350 to 570 square feet. So the resident units, again, think of them as the bedroom, because most of the other activities that the residents participate in, I mean, there's several dining rooms, one on every floor. Harley, do you want to describe a little more in more detail? I mean, did I answer your question, or do you want to go a little more detail?
Maybe a little bit more detail.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was asking. Similar to like the concierge lounge. You go to those high-end hotels. And that's, you're asking regarding the upper floors?
Yeah, the residential units.
Okay.
Generally the size, I mean, he answered the general size, but, you know, what we're
The
looking
upper
at.
floors are memory care, and those are self-contained. So they're dining and activity rooms, outside space. Everything that an individual would need to live in the building is on that floor.
And those are the 570 square foot, roughly, those are the bigger units then?
From 350 to 570, yes.
Okay. I guess my basic concern about the building is not the parking issues that you illustrate. I don't think those will be too much of an issue, and the size of the units, I'm sure, are fine. What concerns me is really that this building is so restrictive in terms of its use. It is, if this business doesn't work, this building is unusable for anything else. This parking is so restrictive for any other usage other than yours. And again, to be clear, for your usage, I think the parking's fine. The units are really small. The retail is almost non-usable. I mean, the cafe is 1,900 square feet. I don't even know of a comparable cafe, at least here in the city, that can be filled out with 1,900 square feet. I mean, and you have showed a bunch of seating. I mean, I'm not really sure what we're serving in there. So I have real concerns about how this building being so specifically designed and our options as a city should the Kensington not work out.
I'd like to respond to that.
Sure.
I've been in assisted living for 20 years. And when I started 20 years ago, that was a question regarding what other use could the building be used for. And that came up very commonly. Today, assisted living is a very established use, and I would say is as common or as needed and required as a hotel. So, for example, our White Plains, New York facility, we've been open for 2 years now. We're 99% occupied and have a waiting list. Therefore, I don't know of any assisted living building that has gone out of business and had to be converted to some other use. It is a well-established use, real estate use, and lenders today, compared to 20 years ago, lenders were asking that question, what happens if it doesn't work? Today, it is a very accepted use, and lenders have no problem lending on assisted living. Let me go on to the second question related to the cafe of 1,900 square feet. We have very active interest from Dunkin' Donuts, very eager to go in. One of their spaces, which is 2,200 square feet, and they say it's too large. The 1,900 square feet is the most appropriate size for them. So we think that for a facility much like Dunkin' Donuts, it's an ideal size.
Well, I appreciate the information about the success of the assisted living, and I certainly have no reason to argue with it. I don't know the parking circumstances at the other facilities, at other assisted living facilities, and if, because that's really, to me, the limitation. You know, you can always convert 500 or 300 square foot rooms into much larger ones. The parking, though, has there's nowhere to go on this plan. You have whatever it was, 53 spaces, and that's all there is. I'm happy that you have some interest in a tenant. Is it the same Dunkin' Donuts owner that we have just down the street, or is it they're looking for a second location in the city, or is it just a different owner? I don't know how they work there.
Yes, it's the same franchisee. But again, you know, we don't want to exclude other.
No, sure. I just want to know if that
Yeah,
other
it's the
location was
same-
aware that someone was trying to come
Same
in.
franchisee, and they feel that they can have 2 locations in the city because they serve different populations.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for the information.
Quick architectural questions. The, on the right side of the building, you have, facing Broad Street, looking towards the building. On the left side, sorry, you have a transformer. I was wondering if that transformer is shielded from the street?
Yes, yes, it will be screened.
It will be screened, okay.
Yes.
And then another concern that I had was looking at the bathroom facilities that you have. Does it meet code requirements? Because you have, you know, you have the gallery space and then you have a cafe, and it seems as if the bathroom space is it looks inadequate, but I'm not sure. I don't know what code, if the code requirements, if you're meeting the minimum code requirements for bathrooms in that area.
Yes, we are. And then they are ADA accessible bathrooms.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I have some questions about the financial aspects of it, which maybe is boring to a lot of people. So I'll just ask them. We can either answer them now or I can catch up later. But this is sort of a fundamental question: is an office building like the tax analyst building, you know, how is that assessed, and then how does that assessment change over time? I know on a assisted living, there's this formula that's based on costs versus revenue, but like a tax analyst building, I don't know who would be best to answer that question. Maybe somebody not here.
I think it would be based on the rents that the building achieves, which creates a value, and then also there would be business privilege license taxes plus equipment taxes.
Well, just because what I'm getting at is, you know, we're trying to think about the best use for the site, and I know the comparisons seem to indicate that a lot of other uses wouldn't necessarily be possible, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around the payment in lieu of taxes is a nice idea, but we're sort of trying to mimic something that already exists, which is sort of the natural change in value of commercial properties and how they're taxed, and it just makes me nervous that this artificial approach may down the road get to a point where it's not as sort of favorable or comparable as if, you know, if this was a normal business that was assessed and taxed normally. So trying to get my head around that. You know, related to that comparison, you know, you had a 40,000 square foot office building throwing off only, I think, like $44,000 a year in real estate tax, which seemed very different. And I mean, this is sort of nitpicking, but if we're going to do this kind of comparison, I mean, that seemed a lot different than the more than 100K or 80K or something that your project. It seems like a 40,000 square foot office building would throw off a lot more B-pole tax, for example, than assisted living that's generating $8 million a year. So I'm not sure about these numbers. And then a lot of these feasible comments relate to parking, but you know, if some lot consolidation was happening, you know, there's 2 adjacent lots on the backside that I think one is on, you know, has a for sale sign up now. So I think that there are, if we're going to look at this and sort of compare other things that could happen on that site, it's not completely fair to ignore the fact that there is adjacent lots that could potentially be included to allow for parking similar to what the hotel has in terms of sticking out the back or other things. So for me, it's one thing to say, hey, this thing would be better than the existing Burger King, but it's a much more complicated thought process to consider other things that could happen there. And part of it, honestly, is everybody learning a little bit more about how these things are assessed. Even I don't quite obviously understand it. But and I guess my specific question, which I don't think you did in your presentation, but the payment in addition to taxes had an escalation thing, but it was like tiered every 5 years. And I saw some comparison about how, you know, obviously a normally assessed thing would get assessed every year, and I didn't know how that compared. I mean, you know, they compared it to if it was an annual assessment increase of 1.5% or 3%, but I don't know what an office building, for example, how that would change over time. So that comparison didn't help me too much. I'm getting the sense I should go talk to Rick about all this stuff sometime, since he would probably know. All right.
Okay.
Sorry. Nobody has my answers. Oh, would the bathrooms be locked like at Panera? Because that's the worst.
Probably after business hours.
Well, I'm saying during, go to, anyway, sorry. Get a little code, the password, I don't remember the password. They give you the wrong password.
Just an observation of the roof angle and your exposure to the sun. I mean, that would be perfect for a PV system.
We did look into hot water solar.
Okay, you go, and then Sharon can go.
Hi.
Andrea.
Yes. Each of the two bike racks, the outdoor one and the secure one, we're sizing for approximately 10 bikes. Correct.
That was his suggestion, yes.
Yeah, that was one of the things, let's see.
That's the space in between, in the midst of the parking, yes. Yeah.
I would expect it to hold at least 20 bikes, and it could be as many as 40 if you double stacked them.
I feel like it's not the resident for space for all the spices that they accept. It doesn't look like they're expecting that.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that you would always want to look at is sort of, you don't want to go around requiring bike parking if you don't think anyone at the site is going to use the bike parking. So it really does come down to what do you think is the best way to incentivize, and if the best incentive is really going to be in the transit use, then you would want to sort of put more eggs in that transit basket. If this were something like an apartment building with studios and one bedrooms, you might look more at that, turning that into a secure bike parking facility. Yeah, the trick of secure parking is that anyone who has a key can get into the room. So who do you make it secure for? This came up at the Harris Teeter project, the 301 Broad Street project, that there's secure bike parking, and it's been determined that would be secure for the residents. So the residents will have access to those rooms, but not the employees of the Harris Teeter. So here, if you're thinking about secure bike parking, the people who are really going to be needing it would be the employees. So it would be the employees of the assisted living facility, the Dunkin' Donuts, the gallery. Those are the people who are going to need to store the bikes long term.
Sharon, did you want to follow up with something?
So on the elevation that is back of the north elevation, there is, what, can you know what that brick picture is? Is that the head house for the elevator, or is that something else that is looking up through the roof?
It's the elevator.
Have you given thought to kind of material there, or is it?
Well, at one time, in our original plans and our subsequently revised plans, the rear elevation had a combination of brick and hardy plank. And we received feedback from staff that they'd like to see more brick. So,
I remember the comment that the siding, the large expanse of siding, and it was not look so heavy. But, yeah, I think there's something about that portion that needs to be broken up a little bit more. I mean, it's expanse of darkness going up, and it's not a lot of articulation.
well, we have changed the, this is a lighter colored brick, so and we have some pattern here.
And I see you've broken up the roof line.
Correct.
Kind of meet the other side where the garden is on that back side. Because it was kind of an awkward ending when we were doing it, but maybe then that's working more successfully, I think.
Okay, Rob's ready to go, I think. I'm sorry that this has gone on so late. We didn't think that our meeting was going to go on as long, but everybody gets their say here, so we felt as though we needed to proceed with that. I do have a couple of questions, but one of the things that I'd like to ask this entire group before I ask my questions is, do you feel as though this format worked for you and your group, or do you prefer to have individual meetings where you can more or less focus on your concerns as opposed to listening to everybody else?
Of course, that doesn't refer to architectural advisory.
You'll still, and everybody will, any group that wants to have their own work session, just ask. I mean, but we just thought that it would work better for all of us, and so that the developer didn't have to give so many presentations.
I agree with that.
Right, yeah.
And I thought that's
Yeah.
how we had
And I would
it.
also ask the next time you
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Charlie.
The basketball.
Oh, okay, well. But are you following the game? Sharon?
I would like to note that I think it's important to have this kind of conversation, but again, I think it's important also to have the full architectural advisory board present, because I think we all bring very different.
Exactly, yeah.
Yours is totally different, architectural.
Okay, my questions are two quick ones. One, they're not questions, they're comments. I'm concerned too about the capacity and the size and the utility of those two small bathrooms. I really think if you've got a cafe and a gallery, and you're just going to need more than that. And my other comment or question is, how large, can you give me a sense of how large the gallery would be? Just take this room and give me 1,100 square feet in this room.
Boy.
About the size of,
I'm going to estimate that this is a 30-foot wide room, and so bring it out to probably a little bit up.
so maybe half of this entire
I would say
space.
half of it, yes.
From the beginning, I haven't thought that a gallery was a use in this particular area because you're not going to get enough action there. I mean, it just seems to me that the galleries that I'm familiar with, and I work downtown and have worked near the 7th Street corridor where they have a lot of galleries, and they just don't, there's a lot of street action there because there's restaurants and people going to and from work situations, but there's very little action in those galleries. So I'm just concerned that this is not a good use of that space. If no one else has any further comments or questions? Oh, staff.
Well, I
Jim.
I think this has been very helpful to have everyone here and to hear the different perspectives of the various groups, and no doubt there'll be more detailed discussions as they go forward. But I also wanted to mention, we've talked a lot about parking, we've talked a lot about economics, we've talked about, architecture, et cetera. What we haven't talked a lot about is where is there a need for this kind of facility here in the city. I think presently we have 68 beds at the Sunrise Project for a city of over 12,000. We are an older skewing age community, and there are very few places that I can think of where you'd be able to get this number of rooms, beds, et cetera, in the city. Certainly not in non-commercially zoned properties. I can't think of any places in the city that are large enough to contain a project that would provide this much resource. Granted, these are expensive, the costs are high, but I think we do need to look broadly at the question of beyond just the highest and best dollar value, what are we doing, and are we providing the kind of housing needs for a wide variety of population needs within the city? And so I think that's also a major question that needs to be asked about, in addition to the very good ones that have been talked about tonight in terms of the details of how this would function. And that is there a need for this kind of housing resource for our population in our city, or is that something you'd have to do elsewhere? Or are there other sites that are better suited or that might be available at some point for what will be a need for more than the 68 beds we presently have in the city? So that's kind of a broader overview for folks to think about all the various disciplines that are represented here tonight.
Thank you. Lauren, did you have something?
Just that the mayor and the city manager have determined that we're kind of under a tight time frame. So if any of the boards and commissions wants to formally present something that needs to go before the city council, you have until April the 29th. And then I got to start working on the staff report. Now, the planning commission is going to take this matter up on the 21st of April. And then the first work session, as has already been stated, is May the 5th. And then at the moment, we're being told that the second reading and final vote will be May the 12th. So that doesn't give us a lot of time. That's one of the reasons we thought that this approach might speed things up a little bit. But we don't want your comments, we don't want you to feel rushed about your comments. That's not our intent. We're not trying to railroad anything through. It's just that, it sat in work sessions and different things, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're told that the vote's going to be on the 12th. And so things had to pick up very quickly. I had proposed that. I had proposed.
It could go, we'd have to go when in May? They got another shot in May.
Well, but my report will be done before, in other words, you're done this month, correct? Right. I wanted to get it before you guys, before this meeting, but was told that we had passed the point, the cutoff point. We're going to have to figure another way around that. Whether you call another meeting at a different time, I don't know. But I'm willing to work with you and do everything we can. I'm sure the applicant will.
Sure.
But we've also heard from quite a few of the residents and what they want. So, you know, when you get into architecture, you know, it depends on who you talk to in terms of what they like and don't like. So it's a tough one.
Anything further?
Rob's done.
Rob has adjourned the meeting.
Rob adjourns.